Hi, it's Deborah Carter here with Preparation Tech. Today I'm super excited because I am here with Isaac Sesi in Kumasi, Ghana. And many of you may have actually read about Isaac on Humans of New York, which is a Facebook storytelling platform. He shared his story of being a child in Ghana and befriending an American girl and her family, and then becoming this innovator. And he has some exciting news that he will probably share with us himself. But anyway, we're here with Isaac, and he is an innovator from Africa doing some great things. And thank you very much for joining us, Isaac. Let's start off by you actually telling us who you are and what you do.
All right, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I'm really excited to share my story. And my name is Isaac Sesi, like you mentioned. I am an entrepreneur, I am an innovator, and I'm an engineer. And I am passionate about solving, pressing, challenging global problems using science and technology. Currently, I am passionate about focusing on education and agriculture specifically. And so basically what I'm working on is how can I use technology to improve agriculture in a way that is meaningful to people and that makes real impacts in their lives. And I currently run a startup that is locally developing and providing technology-driven solutions for farmers and agribusinesses along the agri value chain to help them reduce losses and maximize productivity.
Great. And your exciting news is that you were named last year by MIT as one of the top 35 innovators under the age of 35. So first off, congratulations. And maybe tell us how that came about.
Thank you very much. Actually, I was the youngest on the list from last year, which is quite an honor. And I was really excited to find out that I was like the only one from Africa. There was another African on the list, but she has been living in Ethiopia. She's from Ethiopia, but she's been living in the US all her life, so probably she doesn't really count. So I was excited to find out I was the only one from Africa and the youngest on the list. So how that happened was the MIT Innovators under 35 list basically recognizes top innovators across the world that are developing and delivering solutions that really impact the world and have the potential to impact millions and even billions of people in a very fundamental way. So at the time I was working on the research for what I currently am doing now. My research was based on developing a low-cost grain moisture meter that we have identified that could be a big solution in trying to fight post-harvest losses in Africa, which is a really big problem here in Africa. So my work on the grain moisture meter from research phase to actually bringing it to market in a way that was impactful for smallholder farmers in Africa is one of the things that got me to be recognized as an innovator under 35 by MIT, which was really an honor because I'd always wanted to, go and study at MIT, but I didn't get the opportunity because at the time I was too broke to afford to write SAT. So being recognized by MIT and having the opportunity to go give a speech in front of some really distinguished people around the world was such a big honor to me.
It's an amazing story. So tell us a bit more about GrainMate. It is a meter that you insert into grain to basically test the moisturizer, because if I understand from you, there's a big problem with grains going bad or something because of the moisture that's in them. So tell us a bit about how you developed GrainMate. What was the process? Who did you work with to get a prototype and then to test it and then to actually offer it commercially?
Thank you. So let me just start by talking a bit about the problem. and then put it in a context that people can, appreciate and understand. So in most parts of Africa, smallholder farmers produce about 80% of all of the food we consume on the continent. And these smallholder farmers are basically farmers that have just small pieces of land that they grow on. A typical smallholder farmer makes about $300 or $400 in a whole year. Imagine having to live on about $400 for a whole year. That's like, you can't even begin to imagine.
Nothing, yeah.
And on top of that, they have a problem where they stand to lose up to 30% of their grains because of post-harvest losses. And one of the major causes of these losses is high moisture content in the grains that they harvest because they don't have any means to accurately measure the moisture content. So it sounds like a very simple problem, but it impacts people, millions of people at a very, very fundamental level. So back then I was doing my national service after my undergraduate. I studied electrical engineering, and I was doing my national service in my university. And at the time, there was a research going on with some partners, scientists, and experts in post-harvest from Oklahoma State University, Kansas State University, and a number of USAID-related agencies in collaboration with my university. So from the side of my university, they were looking for someone with an engineering background that could be part of the research and that could take the scientific findings of the research and help to locally, produce this moisture meter or develop this moisture meter that had been identified as one of the viable solutions to help reduce these losses. So I came in there, or I was discovered because on campus, I was the guy that was known as the electronics guy. So if you're looking for someone to build anything, you'd probably be referred to me. So I joined the project, and for about 2 years, I helped to take the knowledge that had been gathered from the research and locally producing this moisture meter. I put together a team of 3 other people, and then we worked together to come up with like the first prototypes of the moisture meter in Ghana under the guidance of one of the principal engineers. And so from there, after the project ended, what happened was everybody was like, hey, you guys did so well. We had no idea you were going to be able to make this, because literally no one builds electronics or manufactures electronics in Ghana or Africa. If you have an idea for electronics, to manufacture an electronic component, they tell you go and do it in China. But us being able to defy those odds to make this locally was pretty impressive. So the team was like, hey, Isaac, you have to really, if you want to see the impact in the work you have done, you have to start a company out of this. And so out of that, I started Sesi Technologies to take this further and make this technology that is really going to help farmers available to more farmers by commercializing it. And for the last 2 years, that is what I have been committed to doing.
Oh, this story is amazing. And for me, why it's important is when we teach kids about technology, we always talk about what problems can we solve? What kind of impact can we have? And your example really illustrates that the need drives often the creation of technology. I want to ask you, how did Isaac Sesi become Isaac Sesi? Take us back to your childhood and tell us about how you grew up, then how you went to school, then how you started Sesi Technologies. I'm very curious about the conditions in your childhood and in your education that created someone like you.
Well, I really have to take my time here because if I want to tell you the full story. This interview is going to last a few hours at least. So I'm going to try and, give you the most important part. So usually when people from where I come from try to tell their stories, you usually hear of people talking about how they grew up in really hard situations and tough situations, trying to invoke some kind of, pity and some kind of, emotions in people. But I want to really state that for me, if you hear the story, what I want you to take away is not to feel, sad for me or to feel pity for me, but to realize that no matter what situation you're inside or you are in, once you have a will, there's always going to be a way. So that's what I want you to take away, even before I start speaking about, how I grew up. Yeah. So I grew up in Accra. I I grew up first as an only child. My parents divorced when I was young, and my dad was working night shifts. I lived with my dad. He was working night shifts, and then I would go to school during the day. So we had very little contact. He had a bicycle that he would go drop me off at school with his bicycle, and then I would be at school. When I come back, or when he comes to pick me up from school, 30 minutes later, he's gone back to work, and I am alone. So in a whole day, I had about, just 1 hour of contact with my dad maximum. So I was usually very alone. Our house had no electricity, had no running water. And what kids would use to entertain themselves, like TV and shows and all of these things, I didn't have the privilege of having those. And so when I go to school and my friends were talking about all of the shows they watched the previous day and the movies they watched, I didn't have anything to say. I was just going to listen. But for me, one of the things that kept me going was my curiosity and my love for reading. So I would read anything I could find. Sometimes I would literally go sit at a busy intersection just to read all of the signboards and the street signs and everything I could see. And when you don't have a TV at home and you literally have like so much time on your hands, you can afford to just go sit in the intersection and read random stuff. I read newspapers, I read Bible stories, I even read Quran. I just read anything I could find. So my routine usually involved coming home from school, going to sit at in front of our house. We usually had these tourists that would come by, and that was where I met Talia, who, if you go read my Humans of New York story, you know everything that came out of there. Through Talia and another friend that I met, Adrian, I was being bombarded. They kept sending me books and books and books and books. And so I was like, I always have something to read. And I was really curious too.
Were they sending you from the US? Were these friends from the US?
From the US. Wow. Yeah. They were just sending me books, among other things. So I realized I was also really curious with my hands. The only source of entertainment that we had, which was close to digital, was a very old radio set that my dad loved so much. But I was so curious, I eventually managed to take apart the radio set just to see what was in the radio, what was making it work. My dad was so furious with me, but then I had already done it. So then I some of the things that made me smile so much was when I could find a motor and connect a battery to it, and then the motor will start spinning. I'll just be so happy. And so I started building things in school, like toy boats, just put a motor, put a propeller, and then put it in a pond, and then see it just move around. And that was so exciting for me. And that was back in grade school, like grade 6, thereabouts. Around that time, my dad had lost his job. Life was pretty tough. I had to contribute to the family income by going to, in those days, even phones were not popular. So I saved enough money to buy a pay phone where I would literally take the phone to people's houses and ask them, "Hi, will you please make a call?" And then, yes, sometimes I'll have people make calls, and then at the end of the weekend, I'll probably have enough money for the next few days in school. But even in spite of all of that, I was happy with the work I was doing. I was a smart kid. I was always first in school. And that was like my way of coping with all of the pressures, and then the things that were happening back home. Just reading, just doing well in school, and just getting the grades. And that was my way of coping. So fast forward to high school, I go there, and I meet some guys who are just as crazy as me, and we started building stuff together. They were good with electronics. They taught me. I improved my skills. And around that time, I knew I wanted to be an engineer. I knew I wanted to be an engineer. And so in my science program, usually you have the option to choose between biology, technical drawing, and geography. And because I knew that like 90% of people chose biology, because I knew I wanted to choose to be an engineer, I didn't think twice before choosing technical drawing. And so, a couple of days ago, I met someone who was like, "Hey, I met one of your friends from high school," and he was like, "You were a very weird, socially inept guy, always carrying wires around." And that was like a very accurate way of describing me, because when everybody else was like, just going for entertainment and other things, I would go lock myself up in this old chemistry lab that we had been given access to because I was the vice president of the science club. And then it had broken windows and other things. So sometimes bees and wasps would come in, and I'll be stung by them. And sometimes I'll be playing around with the chemicals and just be mixing stuff up. But that was like my space where I could be creative, where I could build stuff. So in that lab, I built radio communication systems. I built a dishwasher. I built a food, a cooker, a multi-purpose cooking device. I built systems for my school science and math quiz team. I built science projects. I built robots and other things. And it was like my space that I could retire into and just be there for just like as much time as I want, and sometimes come back at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. holding a board with wires and other things. So yeah, that desire just to solve problems just started from there. And so when I had to go to the university, it was an easy decision. There was only one course for me to do. That was electrical engineering. Before then, I wanted to do mechatronics or EECS. So EECS is electrical engineering and computer science in MIT or some other university in the US. And so when that didn't work out, I went to school in Ghana instead, and I studied electrical engineering. While there, I still had my challenges with being able to make ends meet. So even back in high school, I was doing all kinds of businesses. I was selling drawing sheets. I was selling flash drives just to be able to buy books, just to be able to pay my fees, just to be able to, feed myself. And it was the same in the university. One of the great opportunities I discovered was the fact that as an engineer, there weren't many places where you could get electronic components to buy. And so I started the first online electronic components retail company while I was in second year in my university. And it was like an instant hit. And I started with exactly $0. Basically, I went to people and I told them, you know what, I can get you electronic components to buy for your project, but it's going to take 6 weeks. You have a lot of time, you can wait. So just give me your money, and then I would make the order when it arrives, and then I'll give it to you. And yeah, I was a good kid, so people trusted me. And I went to like 4, 5, 6 people, put their money together, and made the first order, and made a few extra, got a few extra components to it. And so I would give them their order, and then I have a few more things to sell. And from there, the company grew to become one of the 2 biggest electronic components distribution companies in Ghana, and it still is as of now. So that's how I went by. That's how I fed myself. That's how I paid my fees. That's how I paid my hostel fees, because I was on a partial scholarship to go to the university. So I had to take care of hostel accommodation and other things. And that's how I went by. And so basically being able to discover problems and solve problems was a big thing to me. But after a while, I realized that what I was doing was just buying and selling. But I craved to do something that was going to be very impactful to people. And so around that time, I'd already been running a nonprofit right from my days in high school. So working with a nonprofit brought me so much joy, but I wanted more. So at the time when I was invited to join the project that was looking to discover post-harvest loss solutions for farmers, I just jumped. I didn't even think twice, even though I was doing my service. I just got in there and working on solutions that was going to bring impact into the lives of people made me so happy. And from that time till now, I have been working with my company, Sesi Technologies, to make people create impact in the lives of people. And for me, I discovered that I took some time off to think about myself, and I'm like, what am I passionate about? What drives me? What are my values? What do I want to focus on? And then I realized that the things that I was passionate about was being able to use technology to create impact at a fundamental level. And so finding myself in the position where I could use technology to create impact at a fundamental level and still be able to make profit out of it was something that is like, I am doing exactly what I love and what I want to do. So in short, that's my story. That's how I've come up from the kid that didn't have electricity in his house to a kid that is now, providing people with jobs. That is now people are depending on for their livelihood. That is impacting the lives of people that I don't even know. That is helping, farmers and their families to be able to feed, for families to be able to take their kids to school. And I'm really, really excited about where I am now and what I'm doing now. And this is just the beginning, and there's a really, really big future ahead. So yeah, if you keep me, I'm going to keep talking. So I'm just going to hold it here.
But we love what you're saying because your story is so inspirational. Talking about your story, my next question is, what are the characteristics and mindset of people who are successful in your field? You yourself exhibit a lot of positive traits. So the one thing is that you are hustling, right? Even when you were a student, you were creating companies, you were connecting people, you were doing research while you're doing your service. What, in your opinion, are the key characteristics and the mindset that parents, teachers, and guidance counselors should really be cultivating in kids to be successful technologists and entrepreneurs?
I think that there is a very fundamental understanding that someone must come to understand, which will drive what they do. So for me, the turning point for me was when I realized, or when I recognized what I stood for, what I was passionate about, what stuff drove me, and what I really loved. Because back in the university, I was doing so many things at the time. I was doing so many things. But then after discovering the things that move me, I put all of them aside, and then I started to focus on those things. So I think that right in the beginning, kids should be taught to think about the world in a big picture. Like, think of the world beyond or outside of themselves. Like, think of the world in, how do I put it? look at the things, look beyond themselves, right? Have that kind of mentality, that kind of mindset. Where do I want to go? What do I want to be remembered for? What kind of impacts do I want to make? Now, when you have that end goal in mind, then the path to getting there becomes even a bit more clearer. So I asked myself, these are three things that there are three questions I ask people who come to me with similar questions. I ask them, what are you passionate about? What can you do and spend the whole day doing if no one is going to pay you for it? That's one thing. The second thing is, what are your skills? What things are you interested in? What things do come naturally to you? What things do you love to learn? Do you love to do? The third thing is, what kind of impact do you want to make? And so a situation, the ideal situation is when you find yourself doing something that is an intersection of all of these three things. And so I feel like, right from the beginning, we should be asking these questions. We should get kids to be thinking about these kind of things. Well, maybe a kid may not be able to answer all of these questions right from the beginning, but that kind of exposure where they're getting exposed to people that are solving things at a fundamental level, that are making impact, that are helping people. It sort of some way somehow gets into your subconscious, so that kids start thinking of things beyond the superficial, beyond just, I want to go to school and get good grades and get a good job and buy a nice house and marry a beautiful wife and have nice kids, but rather something that is like service, service to humanity, something that really goes, something you do and you feel like, hey, if I spent the next 10 years of my life doing this thing and then I died, I would be satisfied knowing that I was able to contribute something meaningful. So that kind of high level thinking, where we're seeing the world much bigger than ourselves, and it's a kind of thinking that we should cultivate in the mindset of people, of young children, of kids that are coming up.
I'm so glad that you said this, because I think it's one of the few times that I've heard such an answer from a technologist. A year ago in Amsterdam, my company hosted a delegation of Nigerian primary school students learning about computer science. We taught them for 2 days. And our teachers and I were observing how thoughtful these kids are. This higher order thinking that you're talking about, looking at creating solutions that were outside of them and of service. And so I pulled aside one of their teachers that was there with them, and I asked them, like, wow, how do you cultivate this in kids? And I'll never forget what she said. She said, we teach character. From a young age, we teach them their responsibilities as humans to others. And if I tell you, the only time I've heard this emphasis on character and thinking really outside of themselves was back in my childhood. I went to a Dutch Reformed church school, and they hammered it into us as well. And here you are also repeating this. So this is, I think, really fundamental, and I'm glad that you raised this issue. Let's talk about Africa. Africa is rising in terms of innovation. You have a young population. We were super impressed with the kids that we taught last year from Nigeria. And so what roles around, what cultural values are kind of really revving up the innovation engine in Africa? Are there specific values in African cultures that are putting an emphasis on this innovation?
So yes, the median age of an African person is 19 years. The median age of Africa is 19 years, which means that in a few years, most of Africa is going to be, Africa is the youngest population. Recently, we have seen a lot of people, because traditionally, when you are a kid, your parents don't tell you to go and start a business. Your parents tell you, go to school, get good grades so that you can get a good job and take care of your siblings or take care of your family. But over the years, we're seeing we're seeing a can-do spirit in young people that are coming out of Africa. We're seeing a dare to break from the status quo, where people are just trying to look for stable employment. And we're seeing this mindset shift, where young people in Africa are trying to take the bull by the horns and saying that if the people in the West are doing this, we can also do it. So we're also seeing parents that are now becoming very supportive of people's, like their kids, desires to break away from the status quo. Now, when it comes to values, most people and most kids in Africa grow up with a lot of respect for the elderly, respect for their parents, for people around them. They are taught hard work. They are taught that, hey, if you really want to make it, you can't just lazy about. They're made to contribute to, chores at home. They're made to do stuff. There are many African kids who have had to work to help parents at a point. So those values now, when you add them to the fact that people are beginning to develop this can-do spirit, growing up with these values, you see that it's a nice pair where you have people that are saying that regardless of the challenges we're going to face, we're going to do this thing, and even if we fail, we're going to try again. And so that these values of hard work, of seeing the world as bigger than ourselves, because Africans really value the extended family system, right? So I think the other day I was there, and then my dad called me. I was like, speak to this person who is your auntie from this place, and is this my father's cousins, something, and it goes way back. So then we're seen as we see ourselves as it's not just about me and myself and just the few people around me, but it's about other people as well. When you grow up in Africa, especially when you're the firstborn, you kind of have some kind of obligation or responsibility to look after your siblings and to look after your parents. And so that whole thing of seeing the world as much bigger than ourselves, coupled with the hard work, the culture of hard work and respect that we are brought up with, when you couple that with how people are now becoming daring, you realize that now we're having a lot of Africans that are really achieving big things and really breaking barriers. And that's where it's coming from.
Absolutely. My last question to you, and this has been such an amazing, inspiring interview, is do you have specific advice for teachers, for parents, for school guidance counselors in terms of how they can cultivate an interest and engagement with technology for kids from a young age? And if you could be as specific as possible, is it like robotics clubs? Is it reading? What would you suggest?
Okay, so I'm happy you answered this question. I was very frustrated by the lack of technology education in my school, to the point where my friends and I started our own nonprofit to help kids develop basic skills in science and technology. And if you live in Africa, this is a really, really huge problem. But even outside of Africa, there are things that are seen as, especially if you're in an institution where there's a lot of focus on academic excellence, other things could seem as a distraction or as not so important. But thanks to the democratization of education, there's so much extracurricular knowledge that students can gain. So here's what I suggest. Every kid should grow up knowing how to code, write computer programs, and at least how to build circuits. Now, it's not just about knowing how to code for knowing how to code sake, but knowing how to code is like one of the entry ways to technology, right? And then the process of learning how to code is a process that lets you develop some kind of analytical problem solving way of thinking. Have a program that teaches kids to learn how to build stuff with their hands. And it's not expensive. It's not expensive. With coding, all you need is a smartphone and internet connectivity. And I like to share my experience. Now, my startup, one of the things we are doing is we are trying to bring coding to as many young people across Africa. We started a project called Suya Code. Suya Code, Suya is an Akan word which means learn. So it literally means learn code. And right from people's smartphones, they can learn how to code. Now, in the last 1 year alone, we have trained more than 2,500 students in 37 countries in Africa and the world, all remotely. We have not seen any of these students before. But we tell people, do you want to learn how to code? All you need is a smartphone. Download this app, join our curriculum, join our course, and then we'll teach you how to code. And we're so passionate about helping people learn how to code that we offer scholarships to everybody who partakes in our program. Now, that's like, and let me just share some success stories that has come up from this. One student who took our course when we started back in 2014, he had no idea about technology. He had no idea about coding. He had just finished high school. He came, he learned how to build robots and electronic circuits. Within 3 weeks, he learned how to code. Now he took it from there and he got admission to study in New York University, Abu Dhabi. He graduated just 3 days ago, and he has gotten so good with technology. He is even much, much better than me, and I struggle to understand the things that he says. He, as at now, has written code that is being used in rockets that have been launched to the moon. As at now, there is a piece of equipment on the moon now with his code in there. And this is just in the space of 4 years. So this was just a guy who knew absolutely nothing about coding. He was introduced to it, he saw the possibilities, and then he was so passionate, he learned, he became so good, and now he's doing amazing things. And so technology is a very, very big enabler in helping young people solve problems, pressing problems around them. If we can get as many young people into technology as possible, in a few years, we'll be able to make so many more people that are better than Isaac Sesi. I got my first laptop in my second year of university. Before then, I was learning how to code by going to the library to learn these big old library books and then write my code on paper and keep in my wallet. I didn't have a phone, I didn't have access to a computer or anything. But in 4 years, I am building technology that is impacting people at a fundamental level. How much more if we can introduce technology to kids at a very, very young age? Imagine the possibilities. Imagine what they could do. Imagine what could come out of them. So it's not difficult to set up a technology program, a coding program, an electronics program, a robotics program inside of your school. It's not difficult at all. So if you can do this, if you can set up a coding program in your school, if you can set up a STEM program where people can come and be trained in the field of STEM, technology, engineering, you're going to be coming up with so many wonderful young people that are going to be solving problems that are going to just blow your mind. Like I said, if you leave me, I'm going to keep talking. So I just end it here.
Well, you know what? I love what you're saying because we set up a tech academy. So you're saying exactly what we've been doing. So we're totally on the right page. I think that this has been just an amazing interview. Thank you so much. And what I discovered is you rightfully were named as the top 35 innovators under the age of 35. Your story is amazing. You're not only entrepreneur and innovator, you're an engineer, you're teaching kids next generation. So you are just amazing. Thank you very much for the interview, and I so look forward to continuing to just keep track of your career.
Thank you so much for having me. So anytime you need to talk, anytime you can relate it to technology for kids or any ideas, I'm more than happy to share. So thank you so much for having me on this interview. I'm happy to be able to share my story, to be able to inspire kids, to be able to just let people know around the world that it is possible. It is possible. No matter where you come from, no matter the circumstances you grew up in, it is possible. Thank you.